Jesus, take the wheel. Simi, is this my son's kitchen or a science experiment gone wrong?
Mama, good afternoon. No, everything is under control.
Under control? That pot is growing a beard. It has seniority in this house now.
Mama, rest is important too. Not everybody is built for hustle. Some of us are just built for vibes.
Vibes? Vibes is why my son is eating from a flask with a cockroach leg in it.
At least it was just the leg.
My son married a wife, not a landlord for these dishes. Fix this house or I will fix your marriage myself permanently.
Simi, when last did you bathe in this house?
Kunle, what is this one now? You have started again or I'll bathe later. It's not compulsory to bathe every single day.
Later when? You said the same thing yesterday.
And so, yesterday's later is not today's problem. Kunle, please let me rest. My body needs peace, not water.
This is why nothing gets done.
Later.
Simi, your body needs soap. You're smelling.
Soap is overrated. So is water. Let me sleep, please.
A wife who refuses to bathe. A husband mocked in his own office. A mother-in-law who has finally run out of patience. What happens next will shock everyone, including Simi herself. If you love funny, dramatic, real-life Nigerian stories, subscribe now, because this story is only getting started. 6 months earlier, none of this had happened yet. Kunle and Simi was simply two people trying to build a life. And Simi was already, quietly, becoming a legend for all the wrong reasons. She wasn't ugly, not by any stretch. In university, she'd been one of the finest girls in her set. Smooth skin, neat eyebrows, always smelling like coconut oil and confidence. But somewhere between university babe and somebody's wife, something in her simply switched off, like a generator that ran out of fuel and nobody bothered refilling it. By the time she married Kunle, that switch had been off for a while. But Kunle, blinded by love, hadn't seen it coming. Kunle was a simple man. He worked as an accountant at a mid-sized logistics company in Lagos, the type who ironed his shirt the night before, greeted the security guard by name, and believed marriage was sacred, that whatever problems came, you faced them with patience and prayer. He needed both, desperately. The first real warning sign came exactly 2 weeks after their wedding. 2 weeks. Kunle woke up a morning, reached for his wife, and instead of the coconut oil he remembered from their courting days, he was hit with something that made his eyes water involuntarily. He turned to look at her, confused, thinking maybe something had died in the room. It was Simi. Just Simi existing. Simi, he called gently, nudging her shoulder. Good morning. She groaned, turned over, and mumbled something about 5 more decades before pulling the blanket over her head and continuing to snore. And when Simi snored, she did not do anything small. Her snore had range, rhythm, bass. Kunle would lie there some mornings wondering if the power company had somehow connected a generator directly to her nose. He let it slide. Newly married men let a lot of things slide. He told himself, she's just adjusting, she'll settle down. Famous last words. But days turned to weeks, and weeks turned to a full lifestyle. Simi did not bathe unless there was a very good reason. A wedding she wanted to attend, an outing where she might run into an old crush. Regular days, when it was just her and Kunle and God, water simply did not touch her body. One evening, Kunle brought it up gently. Simi, my love, have you had your bath today? Simi looked at him, offended, as though he'd insulted her ancestors. Kunle, why are you disturbing me with this early in the evening? I'm resting. It's been a few days, baby. A few days? Kunle, listen to me carefully, she said, sitting up slightly, adjusting her wrapper with the confidence of a woman about to deliver a lecture. If you bathe too much, you will fade. Everyone wants to hear this, but nobody wants to believe it. Your skin needs its natural oils to breathe. Water washes away your shine. That's why those fine girls you see online, look at what happens to their skin later, fading. I am protecting my glow, Kunle. You should be thanking me. Kunle blinked. He genuinely didn't know how to respond to that level of confidence backed with zero science. He simply said, okay, Simi, and walked out of the room, already planning to buy extra air freshener on his way home from work. That catchphrase, if you bathe too much, you will fade, became Simi's signature line. She said it so often, with such unwavering conviction, that by the 3rd month of marriage, some part of Kunle's soul had almost started to believe it too, out of sheer exhaustion. Now, let's talk about the underwear situation, because we cannot skip this part of the story. Simi genuinely believed in what she called breaking in her underwear before disposing of it. In her personal philosophy, a good pair needed to be worn continuously for at least 2 weeks before reaching its final form and being retired. Kunle discovered this the hard way one Saturday because somebody in that house had to, and pulled out a particular pair that had quite frankly developed its own personality. He held it up between two fingers as far from his face as his arm would allow and shouted, "Simi, what is this?" Simi, lying on the couch watching a movie, didn't even turn her head. "That's my lucky pair. Don't scrub it too hard or the lock will wash out with it." Kunle stood there holding a pair of underwear that had apparently achieved sentience, wondering what exactly he had done in a past life to deserve this particular assignment. And the underwear wasn't even the strangest habit. There was also the matter of the bed sheets, which Simi firmly believed only needed to be changed when they start smelling like something specific. A standard so vague and so entirely self-defined that Kunle eventually stopped asking and simply started changing them himself quietly on Saturday mornings, while Simi slept through the entire operation without stirring. Then there was the toothbrush incident, which Kunle still couldn't fully process even months later. He walked into the bathroom one morning to find his toothbrush had somehow migrated from its usual cup into the soap dish, damp, positioned suspiciously close to where Simi kept a small dish of what he could only assume was leftover shea butter. When he asked about it, Simi simply shrugged and said, "I needed somewhere to rest my earring for a second, and your toothbrush was just there." Kunle didn't ask further questions. He simply threw the toothbrush away and bought a new one, silently adding it to his mental list of things he'd stopped questioning entirely.
Even her approach to laundry itself was its own philosophy. Simi operated on what she called the smell test system. Clothes were only washed once they failed a sniff test conducted apparently at arm's length, from as far away as humanly possible. Anything that passed, even barely, even questionably, went straight back into rotation. Kunle once watched in genuine horror as she pulled a blouse from the clean pile, sniffed it once, made a face that suggested deep internal deliberation, shrugged, and wore it anyway to a family event. He didn't say a word the entire car ride. He simply prayed quietly that nobody would stand too close to her at the party. But nothing could have prepared him for the flask incident, the one that eventually opened this whole story. Simi did occasionally perform small acts of wifely duty, usually when guilt-tripped hard enough or when Mama Kunle was visiting and she needed to maintain an image for a few hours. One of these rare acts was packing Kunle's lunch for work. A reasonable woman would use a clean flask. Simi used the one that had been sitting under the sink for who knows how long, previously used for something long forgotten, quietly growing its own private ecosystem inside. She packed hot jollof rice and stew directly into it and handed it to Kunle with a smile so proud, so genuine, he didn't have the heart to question it. "Baby, I packed food for you today," she said, glowing as though she had cured a disease. "You eat like a king today." Kunle touched, kissed her forehead, thanked her sincerely, and left for work feeling like maybe things were finally turning around. They were not turning around, as you already saw, at exactly 1 p.m. in the office cafeteria, surrounded by his colleagues, including his good friend Wale, who, unfortunately for Kunle, has a memory like an elephant and a mouth like a town crier. Kunle proudly opened his flask to eat the meal his wife had prepared for him. The smell hit before the visual did. A smell so aggressive, so violent, that 3 people on the next table actually stood up and moved. Kunle, confused, looked down into the flask, and there, floating in what used to be jollof rice, was something green and fuzzy that absolutely should not exist in food. Something that looked less like stew and more like a failed science experiment. And as if the universe wanted maximum humiliation, a tiny, we're talking microscopic but very visible, cockroach leg was perched delicately on the rim of the flask like it was posing for a photograph. Kunle screamed, not a manly cough scream, a full, high-pitched, somebody call my pastor scream that echoed through the entire cafeteria. He dropped the flask, jumped back from the table like it had personally attacked him, and knocked over his own chair in the process.
Wale, God bless his soul, could not hold it together. He laughed so hard he had to hold on to the table for support. Tears streaming down his face. Phone already out because, bro, I have to tell everybody about this. Other colleagues gathered around, some laughing, some looking genuinely concerned for Kunle's well-being. One particularly dramatic co-worker fanning herself and saying, "This one has passed ordinary matter. This is something spiritual." "Kunle, is this food or is this a punishment?" one colleague shouted, peering into the flask and gagging dramatically. "Bro, your wife is trying to finish you off slowly," Wale said, still filming, barely able to breathe from laughing. And by the time he got home that evening, tie loosened, shoulders slumped, he had already been nicknamed Roach Flask by at least 4 departments, and Wale had turned the whole thing into an office legend, complete with reenactment during lunch breaks. He walked in and found Simi on the couch, wrapper tied loosely, hair looking like it had entered a physical altercation with a pillow and lost, watching a movie with the relaxation of someone with 0 responsibilities. "Simi," he said, tired, defeated. "The flask." "Which flask?" "The flask, the one you packed my food in today." Simi thought hard, genuinely trying to recall. "Oh, the one under the sink. I don't really remember when I last washed it, but I figured the heat from the food would kill whatever was inside." Kunle stared at her. The silence stretched so long, even Simi started to feel a flicker of concern. "There was a cockroach leg in it, Simi." "Ah, just the leg? At least the whole body didn't make it in," she said, genuinely trying to find a silver lining, completely missing why that made things infinitely worse. Kunle didn't even have the energy to argue. He walked past her into the bedroom, closed the door, and lay face down on the bed like a man surrendering to fate. If you are laughing already, imagine living it. This man deserved a medal, honestly. But don't relax yet, because we haven't even reached the kitchen scene with Mama Kunle, and trust me, that one alone could be its own movie. Mama Kunle was not a woman who minced words. She had raised Kunle alone after his father passed when he was 12, trading fabric at Balagum Market, and had 0 patience for foolishness of any kind, especially foolishness wearing the title of wife. Her visits had grown less frequent over the months, mostly because Kunle, out of shame, kept postponing them. "Mama, next week, the house is under renovation. Mama, I'm not feeling well. Let's do next month." But a mother's instincts cannot be delayed forever, and one afternoon she simply announced she was coming, whether it was convenient or not, the very afternoon you just watched her walk into that kitchen. After she left, Kunle came home to find Simi still standing exactly where his mother had left her, arms crossed, staring at the mess like she was seeing it properly for the first time. He tried everything after that. Gentle conversations over tea, speaking softly about partnership and respect. She would nod along, agree in the moment, then return to exactly the same behavior within hours. He tried gifts, new sponges, nice-smelling soap, a small vanity set with her name engraved on it, hoping the right tools might inspire her. She admired them for 2 days, then they joined the growing collection of unused items gathering dust in the bathroom. He even tried an ultimatum once, the closest he ever came to raising his voice. "Simi, I need things to change. I can't keep explaining to my mother why my house looks this way. I need you to try. Just try." For a brief, fragile moment, she looked like she might actually take it seriously. Her eyes softened. She opened her mouth like she was about to promise something real. But what came out was, "Kunle, you are stressing yourself for nothing. Rest is important too. Not everybody is built for hustle. Some of us are just built for vibes." Kunle wanted to scream into a pillow. Instead, he simply nodded slowly and walked away, adding one more failed attempt to the growing pile. Simi's friend Bimpe was aware of the situation for a while, mostly through Simi's own gist sessions, delivered proudly, like she was recounting achievements rather than confessions. "Babe, you should have seen Kunle's face when he opened that flask," she laughed one afternoon, feet up on the couch. "The man nearly ran mad." Bimpe initially found the whole thing hilarious too. "Simi, you are too much, I swear. Rest is a right. Men just want to control everything, even how often a woman baths. Do you, babe?" But over time, even Bimpe started to notice the pattern, shifting from funny to concerning. One visit to Simi's house, where she genuinely considered leaving her shoes outside out of fear for their survival, changed her tune slightly. "Simi," she said carefully, standing awkwardly by the door, "I don't want to sound like your mother-in-law, or this has passed joke stage. Even I, your number 1 supporter, I'm struggling to breathe in here." Simi, please don't join Mama Kunle's side, Simi said, waving her off, already reaching for the remote to continue her movie. Bimpe left that day with a strange, uneasy feeling, the kind you get when you realize a joke has quietly turned into something real. It didn't stop her from trying one more time to help, though, in her own way. A week later, she showed up unannounced with a gift bag, bright and hopeful, containing a set of scented candles, a fresh loofah, and a small journal she'd labeled in glitter pen, My Glow Up Era. She sat Simi down and, with the enthusiasm of someone launching a small business, laid out a plan. Okay, so hear me out, Bimpe said, spreading everything across the coffee table like she was presenting to investors. We're not calling this cleaning. We're calling this a reset, a glow up. You light a candle, you journal your goals, and somewhere in the middle of all that main character energy, you also just casually bathe. It's not about Kunle, it's about you becoming that girl. Simi actually considered it for a moment, turning the loofah over in her hands like it was an unfamiliar artifact. This does sound kind of cute, not going to lie. Right? I got you a candle that smells like clean linen. Manifest it into existence, babe. For exactly 4 days, the glow-up era held strong. Simi lit the candle every evening, wrote one sentence in the journal each time, today I thought about resting, and I did, and even used the loofah once, briefly, before deciding the water was a bit too cold to commit fully. By day 5, the candle had melted into a shapeless blob from being left too close to a fan, the journal had disappeared under a pile of clothes, and the loofah had taken up permanent residence at the bottom of the shower, untouched, slowly developing its own texture. Bimpe, checking in days later, took one look at the abandoned gift bag and simply sighed. I really tried, Simi. I really did. Meanwhile, at Kunle's office, the Roach Flask nickname refused to die. Wale made it his personal mission to keep the story alive, occasionally bringing it up in meetings just to watch Kunle's ears turn red. Kunle, Oga wants to know if your flask needs a blessing before the next board meeting, Wale said one afternoon, completely straight-faced, while the rest of the department tried not to laugh. Kunle developed a permanent tired expression, the look of a man who had accepted his fate as comic relief in his own comic storyline. But underneath the jokes, something in him was quietly shifting. He loved Simi genuinely, deeply, but love, he was learning, could not survive on patience alone. Something had to give. The final straw came on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday. Kunle had come home early, hoping to surprise Simi by cooking dinner, a small gesture of peace after weeks of tension. He walked into the bedroom to change and found her fast asleep in the middle of the afternoon, snoring at full volume, generator style, completely undisturbed by the world around her. He tried gently to wake her. Simi, baby, wake up. She groaned, swatted at him like it was a fly, and rolled over. Simi, it's 4 p.m. And so, she mumbled into the pillow, sleep doesn't check the time. He sighed, deciding to let her rest, and went to shower before starting dinner. It was in the bathroom, reaching for his towel, that he made the discovery that finally broke the last thread of his patience. His towel, his one clean towel, kept separate and specifically off-limits, had clearly been used for something it was never designed for. He won't even describe what he found on it, but let's just say it involved days-old unwashed evidence of everything. He stood there, towel held between 2 fingers, staring at it in complete silence, the same way he stared at that flask months ago. Something inside him settled. Not anger. Something quieter, more final. A decision crystallizing. He didn't shout. He didn't wake her to confront her. He simply set the towel down, got dressed, and sat in the parlor for a long time, thinking. The next morning, Simi woke up around 11 a.m. as usual to find Kunle already dressed, sitting at the dining table with a cup of tea, looking calm in a way that felt oddly unfamiliar. Good morning, she said, stretching, scratching her head lazily. Good morning, Simi. Sit down, please. We need to talk. She sat, mildly curious, expecting another one of his gentle lectures she could nod through and forget by evening. I've been thinking a lot, Kunle began, about us, about this house, about what I actually want from my life, and I've made a decision. Simi raised an eyebrow, still not particularly alarmed. Okay, what decision? I've decided, he said slowly, that starting today, I'm hiring a house help. Simi blinked.
Of all the things she expected, threats of divorce, another ultimatum, maybe him finally losing his temper, this was not it. A house help for what now? You want me supervising somebody again? That's more work for me. No, Simi, let me finish. He raised a hand gently. I've already hired her. Her name is Comfort. She starts today. She'll be cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, everything. Full salary, paid from my account. She'll also be reporting directly to my mother, who volunteered very enthusiastically to supervise her work. Simi frowned, confused, but still not fully alarmed. Okay, so what's the problem? This sounds like good news for me, actually. Kunle smiled, a tired, knowing smile. That's not everything, he said. Since Comfort will be handling the house and Mama will be supervising, I've also decided that you, he paused, letting the words land, will be taking over my role at home. You'll be handling all outdoor errands, the market, the bank runs, dropping documents at my office when needed, picking up dry cleaning, dealing with the landlord, everything I used to quietly handle so you could rest. Since you no longer need to manage anything at home, your time is now fully free for that. Simi's confusion deepened. Wait, so I'm doing outside work and somebody else is doing the housework for me? That's not bad, actually. And, he continued, gently but firmly, since Comfort will be living in the boys' quarters, and since I've asked Mama to personally handle grocery budgeting and household finances going forward, starting this month, your monthly allowance has been redirected to cover Comfort's salary and household running costs. You'll need to start covering your personal expenses independently. The room went quiet. Simi sat up straighter. Wait, say that part again. Which part? The allowance part. Ah, yes, he said, sipping his tea calmly, the picture of composure. Since you're no longer managing the household, because clearly that wasn't something you wanted to do, I figured it made sense to redirect those funds towards someone who will actually manage it. You did mention several times that you value your independence. I'm simply respecting that. You're free now, Simi, completely free. No house duties, no allowance tied to house duties. You can now rest exactly the way you always wanted. There it was, the trap, elegant and airtight, closing gently around her. Simi opened her mouth, closed it, opened again. But Conle, if I'm not managing money for the house and my allowance is gone, how am I supposed to? My hair, I'm sure you'll figure it out, he said simply, standing, adjusting his tie for work. After all, you've always said rest is a right and hustle isn't for everyone. I'm just making sure you get exactly the rest you deserve in every area of your life. He kissed her forehead, the same way he had that morning with the flask, except this time there was no warmth in Simi's expression, only dawning, horrified realization, and walked out the door for work, leaving her sitting there speechless, possibly for the first time in her life.
For the rest of that day, Simi sat in the parlor, running numbers in her head she'd never bothered to think about before. She had no personal income of her own. Her small hairdressing business, the one she'd started with excitement right before the wedding, had quietly died months ago from neglect because Kunle's allowance had made it feel unnecessary. Now that allowance was gone, redirected to a house help who was, at that very moment, humming cheerfully in the kitchen while scrubbing the sink Simi had ignored for months. Comfort, it turned out, was excellent at her job. Within hours, the house smelled like actual food instead of neglect. The fridge was reorganized, that mysterious growing thing finally identified and disposed of. Comfort reportedly screamed almost as loud as Conle had, for the record. The parlor sparkled. Mama Conle arrived that same evening to inspect the new arrangement and practically glowed with satisfaction, walking through the transformed house like a queen surveying her kingdom. Simi, you see how peaceful the house feels now? This is what I've been trying to tell you since day one. Simi, sitting stiffly in the corner, arms crossed, said nothing. Watching a stranger effortlessly do in one day what she had refused to do for an entire marriage stung in a way she hadn't expected. But it was the following week that truly humbled her. With no allowance and nowhere else to turn without swallowing an enormous amount of pride, Simi realized she needed money for basic things, her hair, her skincare, small comforts she had always taken for granted. She thought about asking Kunle directly, but something about his calm, unbothered demeanor since the announcement told her that door was closed, at least for now. So reluctantly, painfully, she did something she hadn't done in months. She dusted off her old hairdressing kit hidden at the back of a cupboard and put up a small post advertising her services to the neighborhood. Nobody responded at first. Her reputation had preceded her. But eventually, out of sheer desperation, she took on a small job for a neighbor's daughter's birthday hairstyle, and something unexpected happened. She was good at it. Genuinely good, and doing something productive with her hands, focused and present, felt different from lying in bed scrolling through other people's highlight reels. For the first time in a long while, she felt something resembling pride. Earned pride, not performed pride. Weeks passed. Simi, forced by circumstance rather than sudden enlightenment, found herself slowly rebuilding routines she had abandoned. She started taking on more clients, which required her to leave the house, which required her to actually bathe, imagine that, which ironically led her back to the version of herself she used to be before marriage dulled her to complacency. Comfort remained in the house, much to Simi's initial resentment, but over time, watching Comfort's work ethic up close, waking early, taking pride in small tasks, moving through her day with purpose rather than avoidance, did something to Simi that months of Kunle's lectures never managed. It made her genuinely, quietly embarrassed of who she had allowed herself to become. One evening, about a month into the new arrangement, Simi approached Kunle after dinner, a dinner she had actually helped Comfort prepare, standing awkwardly in the kitchen, asking questions like a curious child rather than a supervising wife. "Kunle," she said, voice smaller than he'd heard in years, "can we talk?" He nodded, setting down his phone, giving her full attention. "I've been thinking a lot," she admitted, echoing his own words from weeks earlier, "about everything, about the flask, about your mom, about just everything. I think I got comfortable in the worst way possible. I convinced myself that resting and neglecting were the same thing, and that any push towards change was somebody trying to control me. But it wasn't control. It was just you wanting a partner, and I gave you a stranger who happened to share your bed instead." Kunle listened quietly, the same patient way he always had, but something in his eyes softened genuinely for the first time in months. "I don't want Comfort's salary to keep coming from cutting off from you. I want to actually contribute again to the house, to us, to myself. I've started building my hairdressing thing back up, and it's small still, but it's mine and it's real. I'm not asking for the allowance back. I'm asking for a chance to actually be a partner, not a problem you have to manage around." Kunle reached across the table and took her hand genuinely, warmly, for what felt like forever. "That's all I ever wanted, Simi," he said softly. "Not a perfect house, not a spotless flask." They both laughed at that, the joke finally, mercifully starting to lose its sting. "I just wanted us to actually be building something together, instead of me building alone while you disappeared into the background of your own life." Things didn't transform overnight into some unrealistic fairy tale. Simi still occasionally slept in too late, still occasionally needed reminding about basic things, because real change, real growth takes consistency, not a single dramatic moment. But the difference now was effort, genuine, visible, consistent effort. She kept her hairdressing business running. She started bathing daily, willingly, not under threat, and even joked about it herself one morning, laughing. "Look at me, Sha, fading gradually every day, one bath at a time," finally able to laugh at her old excuse instead of hiding behind it. Comfort eventually moved on to another job months later, once Simi had genuinely proven she could manage the house herself. But she left behind more than a clean house. She left behind an example, a quiet standard Simi had finally decided to hold herself to, not out of fear or manipulation, but out of self-respect. Mama Kunle months later visited again, and this time, walking through the door, she paused, looked around at the clean, lived-in, genuinely happy home in front of her, and simply said, "Simi, this house is finally smelling like peace." Then, after a beat with a small smirk, she added, "And you too, thankfully." Even Wale at Kunle's office eventually had to retire the Roach Flask nickname after Kunle proudly brought properly packed, well-labeled, thoroughly clean lunch for an entire month straight, daring anyone to find a single complaint. And Simi, the same Simi who once declared with unwavering confidence that bathing too much would make you fade, became, unexpectedly, one of the neighborhood's most requested hairstylists, known now not for her chaos, but for her surprising hard-earned discipline. So, here's what this whole story really comes down to. Rest is not a crime. Nobody is saying you should walk yourself into the ground trying to prove your worth. But there's a real difference between resting and disappearing, between choosing peace and choosing neglect. Self-respect is not about performing for anybody else's approval. It's about the standard you hold for your own life, your own space, your own body, even when nobody is watching, even when nobody is checking your flask. And sometimes the people who love us the most won't shout, won't fight, won't beg forever. Sometimes they'll simply make one quiet, clever decision that holds up a mirror you can no longer look away from. If this story made you laugh, made you think, or reminded you of somebody you know, no judgment. We all know a Simi. Let me know which part had you laughing the hardest. The flask, the lucky pair, or Mama Kunle's kitchen speech. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel because there are so many more funny, dramatic, unforgettable stories exactly like this one still coming. Thank you for watching till the end. Until next time, take your bath. You will not fade, and I'll see you in the next story.